Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Goodbye, My Lady from 1956. Now, this continues my quest to review all of the films directed by William A. Wellman. This is one of his later efforts. It's actually his third to last film ever made, and his last film for John Wayne's production company of Batjack, which had a lot of success, but also some misses, with The High and the Mighty, certainly Track the Cat, which didn't make a lot of money, but I think artistically is kind of a success. You had Blood Alley, it was really bad. Goodbye, My Lady was not a success commercially, but it was semi-critically, and it's actually a very good coming-of-age tale about a boy and his dog. Sweeter and more down-home than you'd really expect from Wellman at this period. Is probably, of his 50s films, which is, I would say, his worst period, one of his best structured films and one of his better films of that period. There's a down-home earnestness to this story that you don't really get from a lot of kids' films. I've never seen a kids' film that's this slow-moving and slow-building as this film is. It kind of reminds me of what Wellman did with Westward the Women, where it is very much a big, traditional, big movie, but he just doesn't like have the bombast of the score you're used to. It's almost like he toned it down, and this is in the similar tradition. I really like it. It's almost like a artier, slower Hollywood kids movie. It's like a director didn't really care if the kids in the audience got into it or not, but still made an incredibly charming story to it. It is kind of much like Track of the Cat, a very unusual way to make a movie like this, but I think it's incredibly effective at building both the relationship of this kid and his dog and the relationship between him and his uncle, and you really feel for them at the moments that you actually need to, because it's so well plotted out and structured that when you get to those moments, you understand that environment entirely, whether you were into this movie or not. It's so strongly well directed and made. A young kid named Skeeter, played by Brandon DeWild, and he's being raised in a swamp cabin in the South by his uncle Jesse Jackson, played by Walter Brennan. Yes, I said Uncle Jesse Jackson. It's a coincidental thing that happens in old movies where someone will be named something that now would be like, oh, that's a joke, right? He was alive, but I don't think he was that well known in 1956. I don't know. I'm fairly certain he wasn't. It's just a coincidence. It is a little bit of a funny one. One night they're hearing a mysterious sound. They're not sure what exactly it is. They can tell it's an animal, but no animal they've ever heard before. Skeeter keeps seeing this animal. He thinks it's a dog, and he tries to get the local business owner, played by Phil Harris, to get his dogs to come and try to catch him, and they can. He's incredibly fast. One day he catches up to this dog and he finds out it's a girl and names her Lady, and shows off her impressive bird hunting skills and how she can smell a bird from about 50 yards away and them to be able to catch them, which no one can believe. And the dog doesn't bark, it laughs, and it can even cry. And Skeeter and this dog become fast friends. They do everything together. They even brag to the local paper about the uniqueness of this dog, which is where Phil Harris actually finds out that this dog is actually a missing dog, which everyone kind of assumed, and they have to make the decision whether to give this dog back to its rightful owner or keep it as theirs. I mean, it's called Goodbye, My Lady. What did you think was going to happen? It's right there. I'm not spoiling nothing. One of Wellman's strong suits that really aligned himself very well with classic Hollywood is the everyman, working man's kind of a film. And this feels almost like the poor guy in the swamp vibe kind of a movie. Like, he really wanted to encapsulate that small town feel throughout this film. And he has two amazing character actors. Walter Brennan, who I think most people know, he's a great actor. He's actually won the most Best Supporting Actor Oscars in Oscar history. He's one of only 3 men to have won 3 acting Oscars. The other 2 are Jack Nicholson and Daniel Day-Lewis. And then the other is Phil Harris, who is most notorious for most of us now as being the voice of Baloo and Thomas O'Malley from Aristocats, and is one hell of an actor. Any scene with those two is just immaculately well done. And Sidney Poitier has a pretty important but smaller role. Most of the adults in this film are great actors, and you can always tell when a director really cares about a kid's film, like the Harry Potter films, for example, when you have a group of incredibly good character actors in a film. It's like they know nobody cares about the adults, so let's just get actors that are really good. And that's what Goodbye, My Lady does. And it shows how great Wellman could be with character actors. You look at something like his better films in the 30s, you know, in the pre-Code days with Wild Boys of the Road, where he worked with the voice of Winnie the Pooh, oddly enough, or Heroes for Sale or Public Enemy. He worked with actors, and this is full of that. And even Brandon DeWilde, the kid in this film, is very, very good, but it's so slow-paced. It's like he lets these actors build these relationships. You understand the relationship between him and the dog, who he names Lady, is both well-conceived and well-built, so that you understand the love of him and his dog. You understand it as well as you understand your own relationship with an animal that is in your life. And I think Goodbye My Lady can do that so well. You know, Wellman actually had a dog growing up that he loved, and you can get that he's someone who understands that world. He always understands relationships and the importance towards them. This might be his most sentimental, but it's almost like he doesn't go into the soapiness of sentimentality. He goes into the realism of it. That's always something I loved about his sentimentality. He has it there so he can rip it apart. And this is not as self-destructive as that might sound in this film. He's using it to be kind of a realist, really. Skeeter knows that this dog is someone else's. He knows the reality of the situation. And Uncle Jesse is gonna protect him and do whatever he can, but you also understand that relationship and how Uncle Jesse knows that eventually Skeeter will leave him and grow up. But it doesn't feel inappropriate. It doesn't feel like the dark, more serious scene, because the tone in this film is so honest to these characters and the kind of people these people are in this film. This is probably one of his 50s films that has the most in common with the pre-Code films, where he'd really tried to make it honest to those characters. And I'm not saying that all the films in the 40s or something aren't, but in the 50s it did feel like sometimes those films don't necessarily work. But Goodbye My Lady has a real strong appreciation of character. This film is all about character. It's a coming-of-age film about a boy and his dog. If you're not falling in love with this character, it's just simply just not going to work. This was based on a novel called Goodbye My Lady by James Street, who was going to be an advisor on this film, but then died of a heart attack shortly before. It actually originally appeared as a short story, I believe, in the Saturday Evening Post. And this film actually won an award for Best Children's Film of 1956 from the Daughters of the American Revolution. And Wellman was always annoyed that this film didn't do better. I kind of actually agree with him, but kids' films want to appeal to kids. They desperately do in a lot of cases. It's a little sad when you see the direction in it, really. They're like really trying to get to that level. One of the things I like about Wellman and why you call him Wild Bill Wellman, not just because of the drinking and the partying, is because of the attitude, where sometimes he would do things that you could tell he was like, yeah, I don't really give a shit, and that's what I'm gonna do, so deal with it. But the tone of this film isn't really like a kid's film. I can almost understand why it didn't do well commercially. I wish it had, because it's kind of so beautiful in what it's trying to capture. He has a very low-key kind of a score. The cinematography isn't too flashy, although it's done by his regular cinematographer, William Cothier. He's really just not trying to overdo it with this film, and I think if you look at something like Old Yeller has a more pronounced score. Most kids' films have more pronounced scores because they want to kind of push the kids into feeling certain things. Wellman isn't really into that, in this film especially, and I think it's interesting. You look at a big mainstream films he did, like High and the Mighty, Island in the Sky. Those are his successes at this point. Those had bigger scores, and this doesn't. It's almost like he really wanted to do kind of a smaller character film, but do it with a kid's film. I don't think Wellman thought of this as a kid's film. This is just a film starring a kid. And you look at the Disney films at the time, you look at even the live action Disney films at the time, they were far more pronounced, and this film isn't. And I love the uniqueness to it. I love the filmmaking and the storytelling. But kids and families, unfortunately, don't like that. They like the familiar. They like going to something and being told what to think. It's disappointing. It sucks. I don't like it. It is disappointing this film isn't as well known. And even John Wayne's kids recently have said that was a really charming film. How come it isn't more well known? How come it isn't very available? TCM plays it like once a year when they do play kind of coming of age films about kids and animals. And I'm glad they do, because I think it is one of the better ones of those. It definitely has a better tone. It is Hollywood. Some of the best actors Hollywood has to offer at the time. That's the one thing about Wellman. He was a very Hollywood, very studio director. And this time it almost felt like he wanted to break out of that. You look at Track of the Cat, which is like not Hollywood at all. You look at Goodbye My Lady, which is like not the Hollywood type of kids film. But then he made things like High and the Mighty just a couple years before. I really do like this movie, and I like what it's saying about kids and their animals. And a unique dog called a Basenji, who was actually from Africa, and they had to import from England because he's very rare. It's a cute looking dog. The girl Lady in this film. Apparently there aren't very many English films that feature Basenjis actually. It's very rare to have this kind of a dog. But it's a really special, beautiful relationship that they build throughout this film. And you can see Skeeter and this Basenji lady building a relationship in a really organic way. Organic kind of character films that you make into a coming-of-age film might sound great for a film critic. Maybe kids won't like it. I hope one day if I have a kid or something, I could play it for him, because I actually think it's one of his better 50s films. It's unfortunately underrated. I don't know if it's one of his best films, but of this period, it absolutely is. And it shows kind of the promise that he had. Goodbye, My Lady kind of shows the best of what Wellman could do. It's probably his last truly good movie, unfortunately, and shows the risks he was willing to take. And he did that a lot. He could be impressionistic. He could do interesting things with the camera. He could push the envelope in terms of what you could do with a certain genre or a certain film. And he did it again with his only kids film that I can think of, at least. And to him, I don't think he was making a kids film. I think he was making a film that just happened to star a kid. Showed his personal attachment to this story. Knowing that, he wasn't just trying to guide the audience. He was trying to relate to the audience. I think this film shows the kind of director that Wellman was and how he could really base a film around an actor and a character. Even from films like Public Enemy and Wild Boys of the Road to this. And it shows kind of the best intentions of Wellman as a director and a storyteller. And maybe you think I'm overrating Goodbye, My Lady, but I actually think it's probably one of the better 50s kids films. One in kind of more of an earnest, honest way, in the best way that you could say kind of an earnest, honest kids film could be. So if you have seen Goodbye, My Lady and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. Check out my William Wellman review playlist. There will be an annotation below, and you can check out all of the other William Wellman films I've reviewed. I've reviewed actually over 50, so if you're a fan of William Wellman, I have plenty of reviews that you could also watch there. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.